Coach, Lance Medow here on the Giants Huddle podcast. Appreciate the time today. I hope you and yours are safe and healthy. How's everything on your end?
Doing well. I hope everything in New York is getting better and you all are safe and sound up there as well.
Absolutely. Appreciate that, Coach. Well, Coach, McKinney played all over your defense. You lined him up at various positions, safety, in the box, in the slot. You used him as a blitzer. What is it about his skill set that you entrusted him to take on multiple roles?
Well, I think, Xavier has a lot of diversity as a player. He can play man-to-man. He's got pretty good ball judgment. He's a good tackler. He's got a lot of toughness. He's a very instinctive and effective blitzer. He's got some burst and acceleration, to come off the edge or blitz up the middle, and he's got enough power to take on a blocker if he needs to. So he can do just about all the critical factors in terms of what we look for in a safety here. And as he got experience, he was smart enough to be able to play multiple positions. He played safety for us in what we call dime when we went to 6 defensive backs, and played strong safety 1 year, free safety 1 year. So he's got a lot of diversity as a player.
What's his biggest strength in your mind in terms of where he may be able to have the most significant impact with that Giants defense?
Well, I think the guy's got some dog in him. He's a competitive guy. He's a playmaker. We have a production, point system here that we use, and he was always, high on that board because forces fumbles, shows up in the right place, does a good job of executing. He's instinctive. He's a quick reactor. He's got a burst. He can be a knockback tackler. So he's always been a real playmaker for us, and I think it comes in a lot of different ways, but that's probably his greatest strength is his production.
You mentioned you view him as that alpha dog. I'm curious, how much, Coach, did you rely on him to be the conduit between the coaching staff and the defense on the field in terms of communication as well as getting everyone set?
Right. Well, as he got experience, he learned how important it was to communicate. I think when young players, when we get young players here, they're so worried about what they're supposed to do, they don't realize the importance of communication. And this past year, X really took the bull by the horns and, was the guy that ran the secondary and made a lot of calls and adjustments and understood that and, took that responsibility and ran with it. And I think that's an important thing for him at the next level.
GM Dave Gettleman said they had a first-round grade on McKinney when he spoke to the media following the selection, and many projected him to go in round 1. When you take into consideration his versatility and the resume you just laid out, Coach, how much of a steal was this for the Giants?
It was. I think so. I think he was the first safety taken. Normally, statistically, there are 2 safeties picked in the first round if you look at historical data. So he should have been a first-round pick, based on historical information. And certainly as a player, I think most people had him graded there. I just think sometimes, in the draft when there's an overload at another position, like whether it's receiver, offensive line, whatever it is, that guys don't always get picked where their grade says. So I think this was a really, really good pick for the Giants. And I think, like I tell all the guys here, it's not where you get picked, it's what you do with the opportunity that you have. So don't worry so much about where you get picked, but, what you do after you get the opportunity.
Well, and speaking of this opportunity, a unique offseason, Coach, because of the fact that there's going to be very limited on-field workouts, given how much you challenge players, both mentally and physically within your defense, how well does that suit him to navigate an offseason like this as he makes the transition to the NFL?
I think it'll be helpful to him because, we do, when I was a coach at the Dolphins or, Bill Belichick's defensive coordinator, in Cleveland, we do a lot of the same stuff here from a coverage standpoint, from a secondary standpoint. So, our guys typically make good adjustments. I know a few years ago we had 6 guys that signed NFL contracts and 5 of them end up starting as rookies. So, even though this will be a transition, I think most of the things that X is going to be exposed to, he's probably done. We might call it something different. I I think it'll be an easy transition for him.
We're talking with the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, here on the Giants Huddle podcast. And, Coach, your coaching tree has quite the presence on the current Giants staff. Joe Judge was a special teams assistant for you at Alabama for 3 seasons from 2009 to 2011. What did you see in him that may have given you an inkling that he had head coaching material in him?
Well, when Joe was here, he was a young guy, very bright, enthusiastic, great teacher, really good relationships with the players, had lots of leadership qualities about him because of the example that he set and the energy and enthusiasm he had on a daily basis, and he was really smart, had a good understanding of football. So no surprise to me that, Joe has gotten to this point in his career, and we certainly wish him well. He did a fantastic job here for us.
It certainly doesn't hurt that Joe Judge has had a front row seat to watching you in action, as well as Bill Belichick over the last decade. But more often than not, first-time head coaches are compared to their mentors, and you've seen many of your former assistants work their way up the coaching ladder, and Judge now has the opportunity to shape his own identity, build his own culture. So what would be your advice to him in terms of navigating his first season as now the official head man?
Yeah, I don't think it's really fair that when you have former assistants on your staff, they get compared to their mentors because, we all have different situations. I mean, we've had the chance to establish our program, establish our team, get the kind of players that we want. And when you come into a new situation, you got to, number one, be yourself, be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else, and do things the way you want to do them. And, get the kind of players that you want. And it takes some time to build that. I don't, totally know the Giants situation. When you're in college, you don't get to see NFL games all the time on Sunday because we work. But I know Joe will do a really good job of doing that. But I think that's the most important thing. Don't try to be like somebody else. Be who you are.
Well, and as I mentioned, it's not just Joe Judge you have a connection to. If there's anyone who has been with you at Alabama the longest, it likely was new Giants running backs coach Burton Burns, who arrived at Bama with you in 2007. He has a great track record, Coach, as you well know, developing NFL running backs. Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry certainly come to mind. What is his presence going to do for both Judge as well as somebody like Saquon Barkley?
Well, I think, first of all, Burton's a very fundamental type, running back coach. And he really has a really good grasp of how players need to press holes, read plays, read blocks. And he's really helped in the development of our players here, because of that. Because a lot of guys that are great running backs, especially when we get them, they just get the ball and run with it. They don't understand that you're setting up blocks and you're helping people create holes by how you actually, take the correct steps and take the right, have the right, point of attack relative to aiming point, and how that's going to impact and affect your chances of having a successful run on that particular play. Same thing in pass protection, breaks it down, players understand it. So Burton's just a really good fundamental coach. He's got a great personality. Players love him. They love playing for him, and he does a really good job. But he will get on them now and confront and demand that they do things at a certain level, which was always, something with some of the high-profile guys we had here that he did extremely well.
Coach, before I let you go, as I mentioned, you have a number of connections to the Giants coaching staff, and you have a number of connections across the league because of the fact that you have developed so many coaches. When a team like the Giants can turn to somebody like you because they have established relationships with you, how much does that help in terms of the evaluation and trust factor of determining what players to select?
Well, I think that's up to every organization. We've had a lot of guys that have come out of here and had successful careers, and I think it's because they understand process. They understand accountability. Somebody's going to define an expectation and the standards. You have to do something, and you need to learn how to live up to it. And that's what we try to teach guys here, and that's a way of the world. And I think they need to understand that when they go to the next level. And I think it helps them develop and focus on development so that they can improve and make a contribution to the organization. And I think the track record of a lot of guys doing that makes people a little more comfortable, taking our players knowing that they've kind of gone through that process here.
He is the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, as the Giants selected Xavier McKinney in the second round of this year's draft. Coach, greatly appreciate the time and the insight. I hope you and yours continue to stay safe and healthy, and hopefully we'll get back on the field sooner rather than later. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Alabama football head coach Nick Saban.
Hey Giants fans, Saquon Barkley here. You want to see more videos? Subscribe below.